Hi, Abby.
Hey, Shannon.
What's up?
Not a lot.
Anything exciting?
No, my life was incredibly boring. So the highlight of my day, I think, was that I finally downloaded the Harry Potter mystery app game thingy on my phone. And so I'd heard about it, but I figured it was like a video game, and I suck at video games. But I had a friend who isn't into Harry Potter, but she got it on her phone, and she's like, it's really good. So I was like, oh, okay. And then like 3 weeks later, I finally downloaded it onto my phone.
I haven't even heard of this. How do you hear about these things?
I think it showed up in my newsfeed at some point because I like Harry Potter, and so my phone newsfeedy thing said, hey, there's an Harry Potter game.
I clearly do not like Harry Potter enough, because all the ads and stuff on my newsfeed are just about, like, underwear and boots.
It wasn't an ad, it was like an article on my newsfeed.
Okay, I need more friends who like Harry Potter is what you're saying.
Oh, not my Facebook newsfeeds. Like, my phone actually has, like, a page where it just has a whole bunch of news stories. And sometimes I actually have news stories, and sometimes I have Harry Potter information.
Important things. Okay. Anyway, tell me about this game thingy. I want to know. I'm curious now.
It takes place before Harry Potter actually comes to Hogwarts. And so some of, like, the side characters are, like, Charlie and Bill Weasley, and it looks like Tonks, but anyways, so you play this character whose brother had gotten expelled from Hogwarts, and it's like, he's disappeared, or he's working with Voldemort. You don't know where he is or what he's doing, but you show up to school.
Oh my gosh, this is awesome.
And, you know, you get your wand, and you get sorted, only you choose what house you're in, which I think is kind of lame because that's not how the sorting hat works anyways. And then you go to classes, and you learn things, and you make friends, and you get personality traits depending on what choices you make. And so,
oh my gosh, Abby, this is an RPG, isn't it? It's a role-playing game.
I think probably, sort of. I mean,
from two people who know nothing about video games because we weren't raised on them, I think you're talking about a role-playing game, but we'll have to check in.
Probably, because you're not playing you, though. I guess you could make yourself look like you and give yourself your name and stuff like that. But like, I think in the midst, you're trying to, like, figure out this mystery. What's making me really sad is that there's a bad guy, in quotes, and I kept really trying to befriend her, and I don't think that's an option, and it made me sad. It's also one of those games that's, like, all time, so you can only do so many actions within a time frame, and then you have to, like, put it aside. Or I guess you could probably buy more actions, but... So, anyways, it's been kind of fun. It's really hot, and I don't want to do anything, but I can sit there and hold my phone and push buttons.
I like that it's like a story. I'm totally into that.
That's my level of geeky this week.
Well, it's a wonderful level of geeky. About your other levels of geeky, did you find a good story for this week for the Bible Story Corner?
Depending on what your definition of good is. Well, let's go find out. So this week is Jeremiah, sort of.
He was a bullfrog.
I knew you were going to say that.
Of course you knew I was going to say that.
But the other Jeremiah we're going to talk about, not the one who has very good wine, is a prophet in the Bible. And I've been trying to figure out how to do the prophets because I was wanting to try something new, and there's lots of prophets in the Bible, and they can be really cool and have really amazing messages, but they're also really challenging, like the letters we talk about in the New Testament, because in many ways they're just prose and speeches, less stories.
Really? They just, like, recite things that the prophets say?
In many cases, yeah. I've been trying to figure out how to do that.
Wasn't Jonah a prophet? He got eaten by a fish.
That is a different kind of prophet.
So Jeremiah does not get eaten by a big fish, is what you're telling me.
Correct. Anyways, I've been playing around with this, and so I thought a good entry point would be Jeremiah. And I was going to tell Jeremiah's entire story, and that got too complicated. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give some more overarching context to who Jeremiah was at the beginning, and then tell one story about him. And later on, we'll come back to Jeremiah and probably have other stories around him, and maybe even a whole podcast on just what the book itself is really about and explaining that and looking at that context. But today is Jeremiah, an introduction.
Fair enough.
Jeremiah was a prophet. He was alive at the...
I'm sorry, in my head he is a frog in a toga.
Okay, we'll go with that. Just picture it. Jeremiah, bullfrog in a toga, who was alive during the end of the 7th century, beginning of the 6th century BCE. So that would have been like,
What does that mean?
So that means about the, 1630s through, 600 BCE and, 590s and maybe into the 570s. We're not sure on exact dates. And they're even a little unsure about when his career as a prophet started. There are a few different dates, ranging from 609 to 627 BC. And that has to do with historical context that is relayed in the text itself.
Yeah, historical context would be really helpful for me because those numbers that you gave me, a lot of them, like, that is so nothing to me.
So at this particular point in time, the country of Israel had split into two countries. So it became Israel and Judah. And then Israel had gotten conquered by Samaria. So they were no longer an independent country. And so there's just Judea, the city of Jerusalem in it. And they have a king. One of their really famous kings is alive either when Jeremiah is prophesying, or right before Jeremiah comes onto the scene. That's where there's some differentiation when Jeremiah started. So Jeremiah is born into this context where Israel's already been conquered. Jerusalem and Judea get conquered by Egypt, basically, and then kind of like proxy rulers to a degree, but are still kind of independent. And then there's this growing threat of Babylon in the north, who's eventually going to conquer them. Everything's very unstable. They're clearly not going to be independent much longer. But part of the story of Jeremiah is him seeing this and repeatedly telling people, we need to change our ways because we're going to get conquered if we don't. God is going to abandon us and we're going to get conquered by Babylon if we don't behave, and no one listens to him.
Oh my gosh.
He's speaking to all these people in power saying, listen to me, this is a bad situation. God's going to utterly destroy us. And people were like, yeah, okay, fine, whatever. In purely sectarian sense, Israel and Judea at this point are positioned at a crossroads. So they have
like the middle of a trade route, kind of?
Yeah, so there's Egypt and the other African kingdoms on one side, and there's all the major Mediterranean powers, Samaria and then Babylon, Persia, to the north of them, and those two powers on both sides are crossing the land of Israel.
Yeah, they have to travel through that area.
Yeah, so it's a really important piece of land that everyone wants because it really helps control trade. So in one sense, they're incredibly vulnerable because both the powers want them.
Right.
In theological terms, the people of Israel and Judea see it as God putting judgment on them when bad things happen.
So, I mean, God had given them this land.
Right. So God would take it away if they're not behaving. That was the covenant that they made with God back in the book of Deuteronomy. God gave them a bunch of laws, and they agreed to follow them, and in return, God would take care of them. That's all the really important context to know stepping into Jeremiah of where he's at. And he's born into a priestly line. So his dad's a priest and presumably his grandfather. And he lives really close to Jerusalem, kind of a little bit north of Jerusalem. And he comes on the scene at some point around sometime between 627 and the year 600 BCE.
Yeah, those times.
Yeah, God is giving him words to say, prophecies to give to the people saying, you're not behaving, you're going to get conquered, there's going to be judgment. And one of those instances is the story that I'm going to tell here. At some point along this line, Jeremiah's kind of been preaching about a threat in the north, but he hasn't named it yet. At which point God tells Jeremiah to kind of do a theatric presentation, which Jeremiah actually does a lot. God tells Jeremiah...
Jeremiah's a good speaker. He's a good presenter.
So God tells Jeremiah to take an earthenware jug and go out to the valley of Hinnom and take with him some elders and some priests of Jerusalem and give this message. And the message is, you all have betrayed me. You have been sacrificing not only to other gods, specifically Baal, but you've been sacrificing children to this other god. And I am so infuriated that I'm going to utterly destroy you. It's a really just terrible, heart-wrenching passage, so I'm going to read part of it.
Hold on, I need to get this out of my system before you read it, because it's a super dramatic, but... Stargate Baal? The Egyptian god?
Yeah, that one.
Alright.
And in this place I will make void the plains of Judah and Jerusalem, and will make them fall by the sword before their enemies, and by the hand of those who seek their life. I will give their dead bodies for food to the birds of the air and the wild animals of the earth. And I will make this city a horror, a thing to be hissed at. Everyone who passes by it will be horrified, and I will hiss because of all of its disasters. And I will make them eat the flesh of their sons and the flesh of their daughters, and all shall eat the flesh of their neighbors in the siege, and in the distress with which their enemies and those who seek the life afflicts them. And then he also, at another point, says, this place will be so destroyed it will no longer be called the Valley of Hinnom, it will be called the Valley of Slaughter.
Aww.
Yeah, and so this is supposed to be a horrific passage or horrific thing God is saying that's going to happen to them because that they've been not only worshiping another god, but sacrificing their children, like killing their children for this other god.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
Ugh.
And so the last, Jeremiah is standing there and giving this message, and he's got this earthenware jar, and then God tells him to throw it on the ground so it breaks into shards, and say, like the shards of this earthenware jar which cannot be put back into place and fixed, I will crush Jerusalem and Judah in a similar fashion because of what you've done.
Oh, the endy times.
Yeah, the endy times. At which point he then goes back to Jerusalem and gives a similar message, but one of the priests hears him give this message and gets really upset and has Jeremiah picked up and thrown into something like stocks. So his hands and his head's kind of, entrapped overnight.
Don't they know he's a prophet?
So at this point, there are probably a lot of prophets hanging around, and you hear mention of them every now and then. Jeremiah even gets in a few conflicts with fake prophets, but they don't want to believe him. Why would you want to believe that God is going to punish you, especially if you're a priest? If you're a priest, you think you've got everything figured out and you're good and righteous with God.
Right.
And so, I mean, he's, in a sense, the priests have it wrong because the priests aren't holding people accountable to what they need to be held accountable to. And Jeremiah is speaking truth to power, a very Quaker term.
Right.
And they don't like it. And so they throw him in jail in stocks overnight in the hopes that he'll shut up. But the next morning, Jeremiah gets up and keeps preaching, keeps saying, God is going to crush us because what we have done, because of this worship of foreign gods. And this is the first time Babylon is mentioned, and he says, and Babylon is coming and will conquer us and destroy us. And all of that is terrible, and so what is really sad is right after he does that, he goes into this beautiful poem, basically, where he laments his situation, and not the situation of Jerusalem being conquered, but the situation that God's put him in. He's angry at God. He says, I wish I had never been born. God has forsaken me. I wish I didn't have this role. It's terrible and I hate it. Jeremiah is one of the prophets you really see his emotions for, and he hates giving these messages. He hates that he's in this position, but he's the one who sees what's coming, and he's screaming into the wind because God is telling him to scream into the wind in the hopes that someone will listen and help change the situation.
Jeez, that almost gives you chills thinking about, like, a person being in that situation and having...
It's this two chapters in Jeremiah 19 and 20 that is just... It's heart-rending in so many different ways, and most of Jeremiah is like that, but these graphic, horrific things of what God is going to bring to the people, and then this lamentation of, I wish I had never been born, this is so horrible.
So can I ask, so Jeremiah, I assume, wrote some of that poetry, right? And, like, who wrote his story and when was it added? Was it after Babylonian came? Like,
so
when did they decide he was a prophet and added his story? Because nobody was listening to him when it mattered.
Jeremiah actually later on in the text gets someone to be his scribe and write down his prophecies and some of the stories that he dictates to his scribe. Some of the earlier stuff he may have either written himself or, in retrospect, then told his scribe. They don't think it was necessarily all compiled into a book for a while, and even then it was probably tinkered with and edited because it doesn't necessarily always seem to flow in a chronological order. I mean, presumably after they got exiled to Babylon, they went, oh, Jeremiah was right. Yes, after the Babylonian exile, when they realized he was preaching correctly and had things to say. But even up to then, this stuff was presumably being written as Jeremiah was out preaching to people and trying to raise the alarm.
People clearly went, oh, we should learn from this and listen to people, even if they're telling us
things we don't like to hear.
Hard truths or something. Yeah. Okay, so is that how this section of the story ends, or did you have more stuff?
I think that was pretty much the end of this section, because then he kind of goes into other prophecies. I mean, similar. There are always slight nuances and differences throughout, and this is sort of more at the beginning, middle-ish of the book. It goes all the way up to the Babylonian exile, if I remember correctly. I'm trying to think of what else I can say about it. I mean,
it's fine if you don't have anything, because my next thought was, I'm imagining what people do with this story, or any of the prophets is point at it and go, you should be listening to me because I know what's right. And we're going to be destroyed if you don't listen to me because I have what's right and you don't.
Yeah.
Like, I can just see it being used like that from any perspective and any angle.
Yeah.
And so, like, what do you do with prophets?
What do you do with prophets?
I mean, every Quaker's like that, right?
Yeah.
Every Quaker's talking to God.
And
not that we're prophets.
yeah.
Nobody pretends that.
All the prophets have that same problem is because there are other prophets running around. They're called fake prophets, but in the moment, how do you know who's the true prophet? And I don't have an answer for that. And I don't think the Israelites, the Jews, the Judeans, or Judeans, or whatever, have the right answer, or have an answer. I don't know what to tell you. This is what it boils down to.
So I can use Jeremiah to say that I'm right. That's what's important.
Well, maybe. What I will say about the prophets is that there's an underlying thing is that they're usually, even if they're friends with the people in power, they're usually speaking against the people in power. They're not on the same page.
Okay.
As the king. They're usually calling the kings or the priests out saying, you've got this wrong. You're not doing the right thing. And so I would say probably the way to pay attention to prophets is if they're calling out the people in power, not aligning with the people in power. Because people in power have different perspectives, have different things that they're worried about or focused on, and prophets tend to go bringing the word of God and not appeasing those in power, even if it goes badly for them and they get thrown in, the stocks.
Okay, that's fair.
I mean, outside of that, a lot of your own intuition, I think a lot of people would say look to the Bible to see if the prophets nowadays are lining up to what the Bible says and teaches, and if they don't, then they're probably not. That depends on the person. I think there's some credibility to that. I also don't like to think of a closed canon and like, well, that's how the books there are, and God's no longer talking to us, or doesn't have new revelations themselves. In many ways, it was also a hard story because it's terrible, horrific.
And they come. I mean, Babylon.
Yeah, Babylon comes and conquers them and takes tons of people into exile. They essentially become Jews in that transition because they no longer are connected to a land. Because they're not necessarily Israelites anymore. And lots of their traditions and their get solidified when they're in Babylon and trying to keep who they are as a people.
So I was trying to think in the sense of like Jeremiah used some pretty strong wording about how that was going to be completely obliterated. Like the land was just going to be destroyed and uninhabitable. And that it didn't seem like things were in like the material world as bad as he was going to say it, but like in a metaphorical world, it really did upheave like their entire civilization.
Yeah.
Like that was the moment things really changed.
Yeah. It's a huge, massive change, especially for Judah. I was saying Judea earlier. I don't know what my mind did. It's Judah, the country of Judah. Obviously they came back later and kind of tried to revive it, but it was incredibly different after that point. This is the last time that they are really a country, an independent country without any overseers of any kind for a very long time. There's kind of a brief little blimp before Rome came in, but even then could in some ways argue not until like the past few decades has Israel been its own country in the same way again.
So do any commentaries have any smart takes on Jeremiah or anything outside of what we were talking about with like prophets and who to listen to?
Okay, there are two things. One is that they pointed out that because of children's sacrifice, God is punishing them by making them essentially have to cannibalize their own children. So there's this punishment and this irony, and because you were sacrificing children, I'm going to make you sacrifice your own child. Which I don't know what to do with that. There was a reflection at the end of one of the commentaries that I thought was interesting. I don't know how well it actually speaks to the story. It made me stop and think. If you could say, why would God let all these innocent people in Jerusalem and Judah die? Because presumably if they're a priest and not everyone is worshipping this other god. This commentator was kind of pulling on some social justice aspects and saying, when you think about systematic oppression, is anyone actually innocent? Because there's some levels of people were sacrificing children. Your neighbors were sacrificing children. And even if you were like, well, I'm not doing that, does that make you innocent of what they were doing?
I don't know.
They threw some other like social justice things that they said were in the text into this reflection, which I didn't see. So I don't think it's a perfect correlation, but it was an interesting perspective of God was so horrible doing this terrible thing, and there's all these innocent people, and saying, well, maybe either they aren't innocent because they're part of the thing that let this happen, or maybe they see the horrors of it and say, yeah, sure, things here are terrible, let it all fall down. I don't think that excuses actions of the people or the actions of this angry God, but it stopped to make me think for a moment.
It makes you think.
It does. It makes
Definitely.
you think. There are lots of images of God in this book of the Bible that kind of make you stop and think and question things. And killing children is horrible. Like, I cannot condone that. I don't know if the destruction of an entire city is an equal punishment, but... So, I mean, if you want to, like, sum it up...
Or do that.
Don't do children sacrifices. It makes God mad.
Yes, that's a good moral. So I was thinking about your, like, speaking truth to power thing, and there was this interesting article. So I went to Earlham College, and there's a lot of people there who are constantly harping on social justice things, and sometimes it can, like, from the outside, it can feel really exhausting to, like, go to a class, and you could be reading any book ever, and every single time the same person might mention something about how this intersects with feminist theory, or how this intersects with racism, or something like that. Like, every single time they do it over and over and over again, and it's really frustrating. Yeah. And then this short little snippet came out in the Earlham Word from, like, 20 years ago, and it talked about this girl who was the person who would always go in and say these things over and over and over and over again, and how they left the classroom one day just feeling frustrated and tired and just exhausted, that they felt like they were the ones who had to say it every single time. And they just had to keep bringing it up, because no matter what book you're reading or what thing you're doing, it intersected with what they needed to say.
Yeah.
and that, like, clarified it in such a different way for me, that this person isn't, in the case of Jeremiah, who later was talking about, like, how hard it was to be the person who had to speak the truth and had to speak the truth. It reminded me of that story of this girl who just felt like every single day she had to speak the truth, and she had to speak the truth, and she had to speak the truth. And it gives me a different perspective for those people on your Facebook page or your Twitter feed who are just, it feels like they're harping on this one thing. And it's like, they're speaking truth that you probably need to hear. Yeah. So it was interesting. And I don't know if that's always the case, but...
Yeah, and how isolating it can be to be that person.
I don't think it's a flat answer, but it is, you can make those connections.
Well, you know me, I don't like flat answers.
No. Well, what are your final thoughts on this?
I'd forgotten how heart-wrenching Jeremiah was really what I came down to in reading this story. But there was something also very powerful in reading it, in some ways, as horrible as it was, of what was being predicted. There was, like, this beautiful, heart-wrenching...
Was it powerful or empowering?
It felt powerful, and, like, in a heart-wrenching way. It was like watching a tragedy. You know the ending, and you see that person who loves and cares and is just trying so hard, and you know is going to be a tragedy. There's something powerful but heart-wrenching in a tragedy.
And a tragedy plus time is comedy, and that's where we get the musical number about the bullfrog.
Sure.
Sorry, my job is levity.
I know, and we need that, especially with this one. So.
Yeah. Oh.
So that's Jeremiah, at least a brief glimpse into Jeremiah, and we'll come back to him.
Do we have to? It sounds like it's going to be sad.
Yeah, Jeremiah's not happy. None of the prophets, just FYI, are happy.
There was a fish in one of the prophets.
And again, that's a different kind of writing. It's a different kind of writing, Shannon. That's not necessarily one of the prophets.
Tell that to VeggieTales. They did a whole song about it.
Oh, I know. That's a whole different rabbit hole we could go down.
You want to go down a different rabbit hole?
Let's do that.
Silly stuff with Shannon.
Yeah.
You ready for this rabbit hole?
Let's do this rabbit hole.
I'm not sure how I got... Okay, so we're going to jump in the middle of this rabbit hole because I don't remember how I got to this place in the rabbit hole, but I found somebody on YouTube who did a musical number to the tune of Gilligan's Island about Jesus on a boat with his friends, the Apostles.
Oh.
That's simple enough, right?
Yeah.
It's cute. They're singing. It's animated. It's not just a guy singing. There's a whole animated show with these, like, little dudes who were, like, made on Microsoft Paint or something. It's a very good-looking Jesus. He looks spot on, just, like, brown hair, and he's wearing a robe. Anyways, they're on these little animated boats what's the story where Jesus falls asleep on the boat and they're all scared and then it storms?
And then Jesus walks on water. No, Jesus.
No, I don't think Jesus walked on
This is
water
when he
in
calms
this
the
one. He
storm.
calmed the storm.
Yeah.
And they don't end up crash landing on
Yes.
Gilligan's Island. So that was the story. Middle of the rabbit hole. I'm like, oh, I would like to know more about this person if they've made any other cute Microsoft Paint animated videos. So I clicked on their picture and I didn't get much information out of that. It didn't look like they had ever made any other Gilligan Island style musical numbers. And I was like, okay. Well, so I went and I Googled it. And instead of any background information showing up, it was just multiple links to people's Pinterest pages. Okay, so I start clicking on Pinterest pages, and Abby, I think I've become a Pinterest mom.
Oh God, what did you find?
Second point in the rabbit hole. Just so many fun-looking snacks.
Oh gosh.
It reminded me of Vacation Bible School when you're a kid, and they just, like, give you fun snacks to eat. Can we talk about Bible-themed snacks?
Yes.
Okay. So there's this one where you put 2 Swedish fish and 5 oyster crackers in a baggie, and it says, one boy had 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread, and he shared them with Jesus, and lots of people were fed. It's a rhyme they stapled on the baggie with the Swedish fish and the snack crackers.
That's adorable.
It is adorable. And I bet you could substitute Swedish fish with fishies, like the... Oh my gosh, I sound like such a Pinterest mom right now. Like, and if your kid doesn't like sugar, you can always substitute the Swedish fish with goldfish.
Yeah.
Whatever. I'm super excited. I don't really like Swedish fish.
No. Well, but you could totally make that for a niece and nephew.
Yes. Oh, my other favorite one. You take a Dixie cup. I don't support Dixie cups, so you should use a different kind of glass cup or clear plastic cup or something. Something without trash that you can reuse over and over again. And you fill it with blue Jell-O.
Giving them Jell-O shots?
No, actually, I did have that thought because, listen, I work in a lot of music festivals and we see Jell-O shots. But I'm not suggesting that. I'm saying you fill it with blue Jell-O and then you take one of those cute little grams, Teddy Grahams, and you just stick it a little bit in there, and then it's about how Jesus walks on water. Abby, I love this. I want all of my snacks to be Bible themed.
Tell our mom that, and I bet she'll get right on it.
Yes, we can work together and make all of the snacks Bible-themed snacked.
See if there's a Vacation Bible School going on sometime this summer. Be like, I provide your snacks. I have ideas. There's a Pinterest.
There's a Pinterest. So, that is the rabbit hole of how Shannon became a Pinterest mom.
I love it. I so love it.
But only for Bible-themed snacks.
Hey, everyone has their niche.
I have a very small, specific niche. I should make Jesus Christ Superstar-themed snacks, Abby!
Yes, I want to see these.
For the most recent version of it, it's just going to have glitter on everything you eat.
Oh, that's not very nice. How about, like, the sparkle...
Edible glitter.
Oh, edible glitter. You know, like sprinkles. You can do sprinkles.
I'll think of something. It'll be good. So, I think that's all I have.
Same here?
So, at the end of every episode, we ask each other a question. And so, Abby, what is the Bible?
I think that the Bible is a depressed bullfrog standing in a toga on a street corner, lamenting his life.
Oh, Abby, that's heart-wrenching.
But it's a bullfrog!
Hey everyone, this is Little Sister Shannon.
And Big Sister Abby.
Hopping in here with the last little news and updates. I brought Abby with me this time because we have a lot of them. First off, I get to talk about Abby and the super cool thing she does when she's not podcasting with me. That is helping people find their path or clarify their current situation or talk about their spirituality with them. She does things like tarot readings and just like using her inherent old soul wisdom to kind of help people figure out their paths. And on that note, you can find her at divinejourney.life, or if you want to visit her on her Facebook page, go to Our Divine Journey.
Also really exciting, we are now on iTunes, so go look for us there. And if you can and you really enjoyed it, please leave a review, a like of some kind. That's how other people can find us. And if you just really love us and want to talk to us, you can also contact us on via an email now, which is BibleSistersPodcast@gmail.com. But we also have a Facebook page, Bible Sisters, and you can message us there. And I think that's how you can contact us.
As always, we want to thank Stephen Kartenberg for the use of his song Gutelele's Happy Place featuring Kara Square. We use that for the intro, and then we're also using it for our outro. It's playing right now. If you want to find more of their music, we have a link on our Facebook page and also in the info panel of this episode.
And lastly, we will be back on June 6th with our next podcast. So we hope you will listen to it, and have a great week.
Have a great week!